Look, it wasn't pretty, but the Florida Gators beat the crap out of the Florida State Seminoles in an ugly game, but again, still got the dub.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Monday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI.com. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we'll start with this. Yes, the Florida Gators won the game by a lot. Covered the spread if you bet that. But the Florida Gators won this game by a lot. It was not pretty, specifically offensively, right? Defense we'll talk about with the 8 forced fumbles for the defense. But looking at the Florida Gators offense, I feel like this offensive performance is the kind that, we spent the past month almost kind of warning a little bit about, where being strictly reliant on deep passes and even long runs isn't sustainable, right? And this was one of those games where it was kind of chilly for Florida, as in just for Florida weather. It was kind of chilly, and your deep passes were not working, right? That kind of stuff isn't sustainable, because if that doesn't work, then you're looking at a really ugly game. Like, you got lucky in this one. You won by 3 touchdowns, sure. And I'm not trying to be the guy that, I know every time I say this, people go, "Oh, this is the guy that pissed in my cereal," kind of thing. I'm not trying to be that guy. I've always said I'm going to try to be as realistic as possible. And the realist in me tells me, at least, that this offense was not sustainable, and this was a game where it wasn't sustainable. Luckily, you played against a team that sucks. Just absolute stinky Florida State. But and I want to say, this isn't just being dependent on deep passes isn't sustainable. This is a game where it was ugly for the offense in so many ways. Even the underneath passes weren't working, because DJ Lagway, early on in the game, kept putting the ball a little too far behind receivers, right? Like, they'd have to lean back, and they were catchable passes, but not easily catchable passes, even when he had the open space. There was, of course, the pass to the left side to Tony Livingston, where Tony almost baptized the DB. That would have been a great catch, and that was about as good ball placement as you could ask for, I think, given the context of the situation. But he couldn't reel it in. Receivers were off. There was miscommunication throughout. There was the interception that was Marcus Burke's fault. I'm about 95% certain that was Marcus Burke's fault, because he didn't even come looking back for the ball. It looked like it was, hey, corner or slot fade to Chimdike, and that's it. And that was there, but DK, it was out of reach for DK, which is kind of where it should have been, right? It should have been, hey, either DK can catch it or no one can catch it. But because Marcus Burke ran the wrong route, a Florida State DB was right there to catch it. So Lagway had an off game. Receivers had an off game with other drops as well. Like, they weren't reeling in the passes that were placed well. It was just a bad game for the offense overall. The offensive line played the worst game of the season, or one of the worst games of the season, in terms of pass protection, right? It felt like multiple times Florida State just pushed through, and it was Florida State's pass rush that got there consistently. And this is a bad Florida State pass rush. Like, this was Florida State's defensive line looked better than they've looked all season, and Florida Gators' offensive line looked worse than they've looked all season. And it's not exactly surprising. You didn't have Damian George in this game, and you rotated at right guard quite a bit, which I hate. I honestly, I I try not to be too harsh on some things. I hate offensive line rotations. I just do. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially when we've heard offensive linemen talk so frequently and so consistently about you need consistency and chemistry with your other linemen. And so when you're replacing your right guard consistently, that messes up the chemistry between the center, left guard, right tackle, all there. Left tackle not as affected, but the entire line performance is affected when you keep rotating there. And it was just ugly, honestly, at quite a few times. Bryce Lovett was decent as a run blocker, really struggled in pass protection, in my opinion. Cam Waits was, yeah, all right, I guess. It was a bad performance for the entire offensive line, if we're being honest, at least in the passing game. I didn't think it was impressive in any way, shape, or form there. I don't think they did a good job. And again, I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer here or anything like that. I'm just saying that this was a win. This was a 3-touchdown win, but that doesn't mean that it was a clean win at all. Because if you watch the game, it was incredibly frustrating watching the game. And if you didn't have as many turnovers defensively, you probably weren't scoring much, right? The run game was very effective. I will give them that. My only complaint about the run game is that you should have run the ball more, right? Your run game was killing. You averaged 7 yards per carry as a team. 7 yards per carry as a team. And you had 7 runs that went 10 or more yards. It's hard to complain about a run game that's being that effective, other than you should have run the ball more, because Florida State's run defense is horrible. And again, I have no problem saying prior to the game, I was like, hey, you usually try to you should be trying to take these deep shots against Florida State, but they were running the ball quite a bit. Or deep shot wasn't working, so you need to run the ball, and you should be running the ball more. That's what it was. Before the game, yeah, take deep shots. But those weren't working. That's when you go, well, what is working? Running the ball, that's when you make that adjustment. And that's what Florida should have been doing. But again, it's tough to complain too much about a 3-touchdown game, 3-touchdown win. Like even Charlotte last year was a horrendously ugly game. Still won by 2 touchdowns. And we were very upset with that one. This one, you win by 3 touchdowns against a Power 4 team, granted, maybe the worst Power 4 team in the country right now. But Florida, big win, helps you as far as you've got 7 wins. You dominated the end of your schedule. You won 2 out of 3 in-state games. Of course, the one loss being Miami, which you can avenge next week. And you know, you maybe avenge a bit on the recruiting trail this year. But defense, hell of a game. We'll talk about them when we get back with Locked On Gators. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, breakfast in the podcast and on YouTube. And the Florida Gators defense beat the crap out of Florida State. I'm not going to talk so much about the flag planting kind of thing. You know, you want to watch me go off on that for about 30 minutes. Go ahead and watch the live show from after the game. Because, yeah, I had some thoughts about that. But the Florida Gators defense, elite performance. Like this was an elite performance from the Florida Gators defense by every metric. You know, you watch the film and you watch the game and you say, all right, the Florida Gators defense played really well in this game, right? You look at the PFF numbers and the stats are there to say, hey, Florida played a really good game defensively. You look at the advanced analytics and you know what it tells you? The Florida Gators defense played really well. That's what it tells you. It tells you that the Florida Gators were on the field the Florida Gators defense were on the field for 69 plays. Nice. With a stop rate of 72%, with a havoc play rate of 20%. Sacks, forced fumbles, tackles for a loss, things like that. 13 of those. 13 tackles for a loss. 8 sacks. Like, you look at those kinds of things and it's like, damn, Florida's defense played great. It was an elite game. Florida State had a negative 0.25 EPA per play, which means that Florida State, on average, lost a quarter of a point per play. They had 3.6 yards per play, 4th percentile. Horrible. They lost 0.13 points per drop back. They lost almost 0.4 points per rush. They were dominated. The only thing that Florida State did well offensively was convert first downs. That was it. Everything else, stinky. That's it. The only thing they did well was convert first downs. And even then, they didn't even do it amazingly, right? They just did it better than they did anything else. But this was Florida Gators defense just bringing hell upon Florida State. The pass rush was moving, and you did it without Caleb Banks, who's been your best pass rusher regardless of position, and you did it without Jordan Castell in the second half. In the second half, no Caleb Banks, no Jordan Castell. But your defensive line, by the way, Tyreek Sapp, I will give you a round of applause because Tyreek Sapp is a player that incredible energy, right? He brings the energy, he brings the intensity to the team, and that causes fans to love him, rightfully so. I love him as well. But he was one that there was always hype for, but there was never production. And this year, he put out pretty damn good film. Like, Tyreek Sapp put out film that makes me say, okay, he's going to be in the NFL. Like, he's finally put it together where he's going to be in the NFL. Like, Justice Boone is another player that gets a lot of the hype and hadn't done it. But Tyreek Sapp put out the NFL film this year. Caleb Banks put out the NFL film this year. Cam Jackson. Let's talk about Cam for a second as well. Cam Jackson is someone who I said should have gone to the NFL last year because I don't think he has much pass rush upside. I still don't think he's got a ton of pass rush upside, but he had 2 sacks against Florida State. He had 3 sacks in his 4-year career prior to this year. Prior to that game, he had 4 sacks in his career prior to that. And he had 3 sacks prior to, and 2 last night, or Saturday night. But Cam Jackson helped himself. He definitely helped himself. When NFL teams watch his tape and they watch his end-of-year film so they can see the most recent product that he's been putting on the film, it's going to be really good, especially because he was chasing down Luke Cromahawk. Like he was chasing him around the backfield, and that was great. I absolutely loved the pass rush plan in this game. I think that the coaching staff did a fantastic job of dialing up pressure and dialing up blitzes and getting after Luke Cromahawk. Again, a freshman quarterback. You should be dialing it up while mixing coverages on the back end. I think they did an excellent job there. You made him make decisions, and he made some decisions that worked out for them. He made some that didn't. But you had such an aggressive pass rush that it was just great. And it was, you picked up 17 pressures, which isn't the most you've had in a game. You've done better than that. But you know what? You didn't do it on as few pass rush opportunities as you had, and you didn't convert sacks on that. You had, according to PFF, 9 sacks on 17 pressures. Getting sacks on more than 50% of your pressures is ridiculous. It's great. You watch it. You see Sharif Denson got in. Jack Pyburn got in. And Jack Pyburn got in by genuinely just winning against an offensive tackle. That is something that he has done so rarely this year. Jack Pyburn is not a good pass rusher, okay? But you look at him against Florida State and that sack that he had, and that was enough to make you go, well, he might be able to be that eventually. And that's what you're looking for with young players, right? Because Jack Pyburn is still a young player. Like, Jack Pyburn still has at least another year here. at least, assuming he doesn't transfer, which I'm not saying he is, and just you never know. But at least one more year, and like that's progress that you've seen from someone who has more time, and that's great. George Gums plays like a bat out of hell just at all times. It's incredible. Bryce Thornton had a few good blitzes. Jaden Robinson had a sack, 2 sacks maybe, or like 1.5. He played great. Like it was just a great pass rush plan that was just so effective against a bad team. And that's not even to discredit anything that you did. You should be able to dial it up against a horrible team and a bad offensive line with a bad quarterback or a young quarterback. And that's what you did effectively. And that deserves credit. Okay. The pass rush plan in this game was elite. It wasn't just, oh, we need to blitz their lights out. It wasn't just, oh, we need to have coverage on the back end hold up so that we can generate pressure. It was a perfect mixture of everything. You blitzed, you didn't blitz, and you got home every single time. And that was great. The secondary at one point also, like, let's give them a round of applause as well. Thank you very much. The secondary was just, I can't believe that I get to say this. The secondary against Florida State, for a large part of the game, was cornerbacks Dijon Johnson and Jameer Grimsley. Or sorry, Grimsley wasn't for a large part of the game, but he was there when Triquez Bridges went out for a little bit. Jameer Grimsley came in for quite a bit. I mean, he still played, like, I think, what is it? Jameer Grimsley still played 22 snaps. Like, he still played a lot. He played more than LJ McCray, who, by the way, played 21 snaps. But so, and I'm just using that as comparison. Obviously, they're not the same position. But you had, for 1 point, your secondary, Dijon Johnson and Jameer Grimsley at corner, Greg Smith and Bryce Thornton at safety, and then Sharif Denson at star. That is young. That's what? I forgot if Dijon's a red shirt or true. But I believe he's if I'm not mistaken, he's a red shirt freshman. We'll see the 2023 snaps. Nope, he is a true sophomore. So Dijon Johnson, true sophomore. Jameer Grimsley, true freshman. Greg Smith, true freshman. Bryce Thornton, true sophomore. And Sharif Denson, true sophomore, I believe, as well. That's really young. That's a really young group. And they played well. Again, you played well against a horrible offense, a horrible passing attack. Sure, I don't care. You played well. I think that it's important to go, well, the stats maybe don't always matter. But when you cut the film on, you could see, hey, did they play well against just anybody? Did they play well compared to their talent? Like, they just played well. If you put that film out against most teams, you're going to look really good, right? They played well. And that was impressive to have that second. Like, Will Harris, I had my doubts about Will Harris. I said, hey, he was at Washington under Jimmy Lake, and Jimmy Lake is a DB guy. We don't know what's going to happen with Will Harris. The year started so bad for this secondary, and they really pieced it together. And by the end of the year, you put out a great secondary, a great young secondary. Nothing but props there. Nothing but credit there. We are about to talk about the Florida Gators bowl possibilities now that the season is wrapped up when we get back with Locked On Gators. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can go catch whichever bowl game the Florida Gators play in. We know that they'll probably be generally in the somewhat southeast, maybe the Midwest-ish. It's dwindled down a little bit. But if you want to go see the Florida Gators play one more time, if you want to go see TJ Lagway play one more time this year, you can do that at Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's Gametime, baby. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free right in the podcast and on YouTube. And the Florida Gators are making a bowl game, obviously. They are playing in a bowl game, obviously. And depending on where you look, whether it's 24/7, CBS Sports, ESPN, whoever it may be, there's bowl projections about who they think winds up where. And a lot of these aren't finalized right now. Florida probably could get some things finalized in the very few coming days. But based on projections, you're looking at Florida playing maybe TCU, maybe Duke, maybe Memphis, maybe South Florida. There's other possibilities as well, but those seem to be the four that I've seen at least projected multiple times. Which I will say this. I would rather see them play TCU or Duke than Memphis or South Florida. I would just personally rather see Florida play a Power 4 team, give you more reps that way. Because I do think that, Florida's in a very unique spot where they're still a very young team. I don't expect many of the key contributors to portal out at this point. This isn't last year, where you ended on a 5-game losing streak. This isn't that. This isn't last year where you went, oh, the coach is definitely getting fired right now. This isn't that. And so I don't think that you see that many issues. This isn't last year. The strength and conditioning was a clear issue in terms of physical development. These guys look more rocked up than they've looked before. They look like they're more ready to go, right? This isn't so much an issue with some of the coaching. We do expect quite a few coaching changes here, but all should be for the better. You've obviously got better defensive line coach, which last year you lost at least one defensive lineman, not talking about Princely, due to poor coaching. Your secondary looks a lot better this year. You look a lot better as a unit, right? And you seem like you've got more of your head on your shoulder this time. So you've got all that youth. You've got a lot of guys returning, which means that a lot of them are probably going to play in the bowl game this year, which means you could see most of the starters return for a bowl game. And even, let's say, the Caleb Banks, Cam Jackson, like you could see them play in this bowl game, even though Cam has to go to the NFL. Cam is playing in the Senior Bowl. Caleb Banks can go to the NFL, can come back. We'll see whatever grade he gets. It's always tricky with like a Caleb Banks situation because his film earlier wasn't great. It was good. And then the past few weeks, it was great. And then he got banged up against Florida State. So that's probably going to play a part in it. But you could have most of your key contributors returning, which probably means that you're in good position to win a bowl game. Because a lot of teams will have opt-outs and whether it's portal or the NFL draft. And you could see that with TCU, Duke, Memphis, South Florida. Like that could happen with anybody you play. But Florida should be in a good spot where they should win their bowl game against just about anyone, right? What I'm more interested in seeing this year is Billy Napier's approach to this bowl game. Because when you go back to 2022 and 2023, a lot of what Billy put out and a lot of what Billy said was we need to make a bowl game. Like we need to make a bowl game so that we can get as many practices as possible. Last year, when they had 5 wins going into that final stretch, it was we need to make a bowl game because we need these 15 practices. It was we would really benefit from having these 15 practices. We need these 15 practices. This team needs 15 practices. We need 15 practices of development, 15 more practices of reps, 15 more practices of developing a chemistry, 15 more practices of this, 15 more practices of that. All those things. That's what he was saying. And then after the Ole Miss game, they were talking about the practices, and Billy seemed way less interested in the practices. They were asking him, about that approach still. And he was kind of just like, hey, you know what? Even if, no matter what bowl game we're in, we're not practicing 15 more times. You know what? I don't care how many more practices we get, even if we have to wait the entire December before our bowl game. We're not practicing 15 more times for one game. We're not practicing 15 times. We're not risking that. We're not doing this. And it seemed like such a 180, which, by the way, 180 is the right phrase to use when someone's complete bad face, not 360. But such a 180 from last year. I'm curious to know where that change in mentality came from, because last year it was, we need these 15 practices. And now he's like, F them 15 practices. I don't want 15 practices. F them. I don't need it. Like it's such a stark difference. And I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure if his thought is like, maybe last year it was, hey, we play before, if we get a bowl game, we play before signing day, we need to look really good so that we build that momentum before signing day. I don't know if it's that now you've got that momentum and signing day is right here. I don't know what it is. But it's such a stark difference, such an interesting approach. Personally, again, I'd rather see you play against a Power 4 team. I want to see a game where I'm at least looking at you play against other Power 4 teams. And I think that the Power 4 reps would benefit a lot of the young guys that are going to be here next year. Like I'm looking at that. But I'm very interested to know why Billy switched up his whole mentality about those practices from one year where you didn't make a bowl game to a year where you did make a bowl game. That's just such a again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just very perplexed by it, I guess is what we'll say. But hey, like I said this on Saturday night after the game, we've done 12 live shows after games because we have gone live after every game this year. So we've done 12 live shows after games, and I'm so happy that we get to do a 13th. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Might not be your last of the day. Might not. We'll be back tomorrow, or will we, to talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI.com, and I'll see you all next time.